Good day. Today we are testing the LAB102P for these coffee pouches, roastery coffee sack. In Aachen. So simply insert the pouch up here at the top. We have 3 different sizes of pouches that we want to test today. Here's the label on the back. The device label is always on the bottom side. And now we've seen where the label is positioned. First, we're going to do a general feasibility study to see whether these pouches can actually go through and whether it works with the machine. Now, I'm doing this quite deliberately here. I'm putting 2 labels on top of each other. You can see very clearly here there's less than a millimeter of overlap visible between the 2 labels. I'm not sure if you can see that well. You can actually adjust this a bit better by leaving a little less play here. I'll improve that a bit now. I would always make sure that it stays centered as well. Here. Works without any problems. Yes, wonderful. Now we'll go ahead and test the other pouch. But first I need to quickly put on different labels back there, because those are actually a bit too wide for it. But yes, let's do the other format first. So I also have a larger pouch here. Now we basically want to move the label, and now we've applied the label here. And we want the position to be higher up. So we need to go into the menu here. Then it asks me whether I want to dispense 1 or 2 labels. In this case, it's 1 label. I can select it here and confirm with this button. I have already gone ahead and set the offset 10 centimeters higher than before, but I actually want it to be about 5 centimeters higher still than that current position. So what I'm going to do now is manually change the specific position right here and carefully set it to exactly 154 millimeters. By making this precise adjustment, it effectively means that the system will ultimately trigger the label sensor at a slightly later point in the process than it did before. I can ignore offset stop. Back length about 40 centimeters, that's fine. So now I'll change that. Now it has restarted. Wait start means it's ready and waiting for me to insert the new bag. Here's the bag with the first label now. Then I built in the delay of 10.5 centimeters here. That's where I dispense this label. And now we've placed the label about 5 centimeters higher again. And you can see that was the old label right there. Here's where the new label starts. That's almost exactly 5 centimeters. So I can very easily change the position on the y-axis. If I want to change the position on the x-axis, then I just need to adjust it here using this side bracket. And I can simply move it further to the left or right if I don't want to place the label centrally. However, in the sample labels we've received here, it's also centered accordingly. If you wanted to apply this label now, it would be off-center. So you either have to adjust the label roll at the back accordingly, or I have to move the tray here at the front. However, since these trays here have a CO2 filter inside, I always have to run it through the center because there's a cutout on the device here. If you look here, there's this cutout for the CO2 filter, and that's where the tray has to go through. That means I basically have to keep the tray centered here and then adjust the label at the back using the side holder. I can also simply move the label completely over here. Of course, I would then have to rethread it. All right. Now let's change the format to these slightly wider trays. We now have a total width of 20 centimeters. And of course, I also have to absolutely make sure that the specific label is correctly set within the required length as well. That's a good example. Of course, it's too high now. If we position the label up here right now, it won't end up on the product anymore. So I'll just go back to the default value now. That means I'll simply remove the delay completely. 1 label. And then it reduces. Really to 0. Now I have to make sure again that it's centered accordingly so that the tray doesn't end up sitting in the safety valve. That's clear. You can already tell it's triggering now, but it won't dispense a label if it doesn't trigger a product like this. I want it to be relatively tight, but still so that I can move the tray easily. That's already a bit too tight. Of course, always make sure that if I change one side, I also change the other side. That has now, of course, given me an error. Now I can reset the counter. If I press the button down here once, then it's back in start mode. Okay, of course I caused an error because I specified a product here that I didn't enter. As I said, we're labeling the underside. Always make sure you have a minimum distance of about 4 centimeters from the bottom. That's very important. The device can't really apply labels seamlessly right at the bottom edge here. So it's really intended more for the upper area. In this case here, that would be absolutely perfect. That's no problem at all for this. In the end, we'll test the block bottom bags here and then we'll go through with it. Thank you very much. So now we'll try out these labels as a test. These are round labels, but also just to show that it works just as well with round labels. Then I have to insert the label roll holder here again. I need to make sure that this roll is dispensed out the back. I can secure the whole thing here. They're magnetic, I can just pull them off. Okay. Now, before I put the roll back in, I have to thread the label through here. Then, basically, I can choose here in which position it's important that it passes through this label sensor. Now I'll adjust the camera angle so you can see it clearly and properly. So the label now emerges from the machine right here at the front. And then it has to be securely clamped back into its position again here, because the label feed process ultimately happens via this specific motor. All right, snap, then clamp it tight again. And now we can close this at the front. Now let's test a larger bag again. I'll wait a moment to see if the label dispenses properly. Wonderful. And now all we need to do here at the front, accordingly, to set up the other label. It's important here again that it should be relatively centered because, as I said, especially with these valve bags, and now I can actually align the label a bit better, right over here. It's still not quite centered. I also have a corresponding diagram down here. Here I also have a ruler, which I can use to align the position accordingly. I'll do that a bit better, otherwise it won't look good. We want it to be centered now. So just pull it out a little. Then open the tension roller here again. Thread the label in cleanly. Oh, if I press the power button, it does a reset. And now I can do some fine tuning. These bags also work without any problems. As I said, it's a bit too far to the left now, the label. So I just moved the bag because I always label on the bottom side. Now I can move the bag a bit further to the right to correct that. But that doesn't work because I have the valve here. So I have to move the label roll a bit further in the other direction. Here, inside I also have 2 stop edges. I'll adjust those accordingly as well. It's best if I also adjust the position a bit in here. Yes, it's relatively centered, but you could still correct it a little more. And now, as I said, to change the Y position, I go back into this menu, select a label, and can set an offset here accordingly. Let's set it to 5 centimeters to demonstrate again. Then I click through here. Wait, start. Now it has moved the label exactly 5 centimeters upwards. It's now relatively centered, and of course I can do some fine tuning if I want to, but the bags are supported perfectly. A throughput is achieved realistically about 800 bags per hour. The thickness of the bags up to 5 millimeters is approved for the machine, both ziplock and others. This one here is without a ziplock, but ziplock bags also work. And as I said, valves. This one now has a CO2 valve, which is especially interesting for coffee roasters. These items right here are even high quality block bottom bags. They can even be opened at the bottom. Now I'll put, and then another second label, placed right on top. You can just barely see the other ring here. There's about a 1 millimeter tolerance on the Y-axis. On the left and right, you don't see any edge at all. If it's set up properly, there shouldn't be any overhangs at all. So it's always applied very, very accurately. It's an absolutely top-notch device, a small desktop unit, very reliable. And by the way, only at ADR do you get a lifetime trade-in on these machines. That means if you ever buy a larger device from us, even if it is in 10 or 15 years, you will get the full purchase price credited. All right, thank you very much.